This video is made for educational purposes only.
We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased.
49.
But don't think that decision to recognize Israel is an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs.
That was President Harry Truman. You know, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, bloodthirsty war criminal, President Harry Truman. Let's sprinkle some historical context in real fast. In spring of 1948, Palestine became embroiled in the American domestic politics. Jewish votes were important to President Truman in the coming election. Key advisors, especially Clark Clifford, pushed him to stand firmly with the UN partition to win those votes. As May 15th approached, pressure on President Truman increased, and he was urged to recognize the new Jewish state that was certain to be proclaimed when partition occurred. Others counseled against recognition, arguing that it would antagonize Arab states and jeopardize American access to oil. President Truman's regard for Secretary of State George C. Marshall was tremendous. The Secretary's opposition to the recognition of the new Jewish state in Palestine troubled President Truman and resulted in the sharpest disagreements the two ever had. Now, for educational purposes only, if America is only about 300-400 years old, what does it mean to capitulate the Israeli occupation of Palestine as being something that is an ancient, old, holy war? Now, for educational purposes only, what does it mean to have separation of church and state and freedom of religion and it being unconstitutional to put taxpayers' dollars towards faith-based initiatives and motives? What does it mean to fund a holy war? Back to the history. In 1948, the Balfour Declaration was scheduled to expire. The Great Britain would no longer rule Palestine. The question over what to do with the tumultuous country was turned over to the United Nations, who would eventually decide to create a new country of Israel, specifically as a promised land for Jewish people. The new country was based on the located across the various holy locations in which many events of the Old Testament occurred, and according to the Bible, was promised to the Jewish people by God. Now, throughout this video, there's been many references to a country called Palestine that was on a map, you see what I'm saying, with a land that was identified as being Palestinian land, you see what I'm saying? And we can acknowledge that from the harrystruman.gov library little website, that they say right here, the United Nations would eventually decide to create a new country of Israel. Was it the United Nations in the Bible? Is the United Nations referred to, or the British Parliament referred to, or the American government referred to in the Bible? So to classroom, to the students in the back, what we're saying is that the United States federal government is able to carry out promises from God, right? Is that the same promise of manifest destiny, being able to, slaughter different indigenous peoples from the Atlantic to the Pacific? Is it? What is the motive, some would ask? You feel me? When President Biden says in the 1980s that there wasn't for, Israel, we would have birthed on or whatever he said, what does it mean, to acknowledge that President Truman was counseled against the recognition, arguing that, there's different people in this council, arguing that this would antagonize Arab states and jeopardize American access to oil? It's obvious the Western world has indoctrinated us to believe that, Western civilization is the gift to God's earth, and that whatever the Western civilization done is done through the divine will of God. See what I'm saying? This new man I'm about to play right here, he new to me. He might be not new to y'all. You see what I'm saying? Listen to what he has to say about the Western world and old Harry S. Truman and old United States of America, man. I recognize that a lot of my privilege as an American comes usually at the expense of somebody else in the globe, and something to think about.
You would think that every European on the continent participated in painting the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, my mom.
Everyone painting in shifts. All of you collectively invented penicillin.
Group
From the
project.
telephone to airplanes, from the cotton gin to the microchip. You all did that as one gigantic team effort. We, the West, abolished slavery. We, the West, gave women the right to vote.
Paul Evans.
We, the West, developed modern technology. You like being called the West then, but just bring up just one of your innumerable atrocities, and then everyone starts looking around.
Not me.
Who, me? Oh, you must have me mistaken for some other person, some other West. Shaggy. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
My forefathers didn't own slaves. My forefathers didn't slaughter the Native Americans. My forefathers were just poor, innocent peasants. I have nothing to do with it. Innocent as can be.
Innocent.
You want to take collective credit, but you want to individualize blame.
Whoo, bars.
You'll say that Isaac Newton, for example, is a product of the West. Michelangelo was a product of the West. Mozart was a product of the West. Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, they're all products of the West. But somehow your villains are all bastards. Illegitimate children that you don't want to claim.
Use the pappy.
No. Hitler was your child. King Leopold was your child. Harry Truman was your child.
Use the
A man
pappy.
who killed more people in a matter of seconds than anyone in the history of the human race.
President
And
Truman.
not to mention every American president after Truman. From the Korean War to Vietnam to the dirty wars in Central and South America to Panama, the first and second wars in Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and before Truman. I don't think that the United States has had a single decade in its history when it wasn't slaughtering some people somewhere in the world. These are all products of Western civilization too. But anytime these crimes get brought up, you deny collective responsibility.
West Side.
I mean, if I try to list all of your crimes, I can't even remember them all. But if I try to list just the ones that I can remember, your battery will die before I can even properly get started. I saw a video the other day of Amr Suleiman.
Who that is?
And he was asked by some lady, some woman, who asked him, why don't Muslims condemn acts of terror by Muslim criminals? And he was trying to be patient, his style. He was trying to be kind. He was smiling, a very forced smile. And he said, no, Muslims always condemn these things. But why don't you condemn when one of your people murders Muslims in a mosque? And of course he has a point, but also, of course they don't. Of course you don't condemn those things. You've got statues of Winston Churchill, who starved millions of Bengalis and who used poison gas on the Kurds.
Winston Churchill.
You not only
Not my Winston.
don't condemn your terrorists, you not only don't try them for war crimes as they should be tried, you re-elect them into office. Not just elect them, re-elect them. And you deny any...
After that history lesson, let me give you a little clip of some of that white supremacist revisionist history of people trying to clout chase using my name, literally pushing empirically false misinformation. Let's roll the clip. How Palestine, which is depicted in green, had territory in 1917, and as we move through history, that green becomes smaller and smaller.
This diagram is completely bogus. I'll bring you up to speed. Make sure to follow me here for more. Let's go back to 110 AD. Hadrian's Roman Empire took control of Israel. The Jews living in Jerusalem revolted against the Romans. This caused the Romans to burn the city and expel the Jews from their homeland. Afterwards, Hadrian renamed the land Syria-Palestina after the Jews' sworn enemies, the Assyrians and the extinct Philistines, who came from Greece and were not Arab. Skip ahead. Throughout the years, many other empires would conquer this land, many of them being Arab. Naturally, Arab people moved in, not only from those empires, but from Arab empires that preceded them. In the late 1800s, Jewish Zionists decided to start moving back to their ancestral homeland. From 1300 to 1923, the Ottoman Empire had control of this region, but it was a non-defined region with no self-governance or borders subject to the laws and rules of the larger empire that controlled it. There was no national identity because there was never a Palestinian state. It was just a region, like the Rocky Mountain region in America. The Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I, leaving control over the region in the hands of the British. This started the British Mandate of Palestine. Again, it had that name because of the Romans. Lots of infighting started happening. Zionists proclaimed they'd be happy if they had 1 square foot to call Israel, and the British wanted hands off. After the Holocaust, Jewish refugees fled to Israel. In 1947, the UN partitioned the land, a state for the Arabs and a state for the Jews. The Arab state for Palestine would have the West Bank, Jerusalem, Gaza, Hebron, and several other cities, while the Jews would have Tel Aviv and the land to the south south of the West Bank, which was mostly desert, as well as small portions to the north. The Jews were given more land despite having less people, but the Arabs would get the majority of the cities on the land and Jerusalem, which was the holiest site in all of Judaism and the third holiest site in Islam. After the partition, Israel declared independence and the Arabs declared war. The Transjordanian Arab Legion assisted, slaughtering Jews in the old Jewish quarter of Jerusalem and leveling the oldest synagogue in the city. The result of this war? These borders. Except the portions they would have you believe are Palestine aren't. Egypt took control of Gaza and Jordan annexed the West Bank, no Palestine. In 1967, another war ensued. Israel fought a three-front war against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, defeating all of them in only 6 days. Israel made massive land claims. These were the new borders. They took the Golan Heights, Sinai, the West Bank, and Gaza. Eventually, most of the Golan Heights and Sinai were given back to Egypt and Syria, respectively. But no Palestinian state was to be seen. In 1988, Hamas was founded, their covenant openly calling for the extermination of all Jews, claiming it as essential to Islam. Fighting continued in Gaza. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew their forces but maintained ownership. The people living in Gaza democratically elected Hamas as their sole governing authority in 2006, causing Israel to put a blockade in place. This brings us to the modern conflict.
And that right there is what I call a conservative clout chaser, who also followed up with a video and saying that he wanted to debate me because apparently I have some strong convictions related to the topic. I said, debate what exactly? He said, my belief is these three things. There is no apartheid, there is no genocide, and that the war is 100% justified. Now, I said, that's interesting. We obviously disagree on all three. He said, yes, we do. Do you want to hash it out? Here's my response. No, I see nothing productive coming from debating against what most world understands as apartheid, genocide, disproportionate war responses. I'm not even surprised you side with the white supremacist genociders. My content jumping without the debate with all these antics, with all these non-ethics that he's trying to start with. Now let me show y'all the video he was quote-unquote rebuttaling and tell me what points did he really respond to other than giving us this make-believe historical tale that he gave us. And if you're asking yourself, how does language impact how we understand life and who we care about? Here's the human cost from 2008 to 2023. Here are the Israeli deaths versus the Palestinian deaths. Now, we recognize that all death is bad, but we acknowledge that these two sides is not equal, that there's one side experiencing way more bloodshed than the other. And this where Obama's tweet comes back in. All Americans should be horrified and outraged against terrorist attacks on innocent civilians. This right here illustrates the airstrikes that's happened against innocent civilians that depicts how many Palestinians and how many Israelis has been taken out by airstrikes since 2008. We see the red is the Palestinian and the purple right here, you see what I'm saying, is Israeli. We see the trend right here. But let's get back to these airstrikes. Obama had 10 times more airstrikes than President Bush. And according to 2018 reports, Obama launched 186 drone strikes to Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, predominantly Muslim spaces. Remember Islamophobia I was talking about? But President Trump beat him out with 233 in his first 3 years. So when we talk about all Americans being outraged about the loss of innocent civilians, does that only apply to non-Muslims, or you see what I'm saying? Now let's sprinkle some more context in there. Hamas was established in 1987. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that we have so many individuals trying to structure the Israeli occupation and what Israel does to Palestinians as just mere resistance to Hamas is cap. You see what I'm saying? Not only is it deceptive, you feel me? It's a lie. And it's kind of how settler colonial violence operates, is when the individuals start to resist, that's what becomes snapshot and sensationalized. Wasn't no Hamas in 1948, 1967, 1968, 1978, 1985? How much Palestinian blood you think was shed before 1987 when Hamas was gone? How much innocent civilians do you think was displaced, disposed, you see me, literally evaporated to make it where this green became so much blue? Indigeneity and land heritage is not the same thing. Having history to a land and having heritage to a land is not the same thing as being indigenous to the land. This is a video about Liberia. Liberia is a settler colonial state that was set up by the American government. They called it the American Colonization Society. They sent free black people and Afro-Caribbeans there in the 1820s. You see what I'm saying? About 40 years before the Civil War even broke out. These individuals were displacing indigenous Liberians. Liberia's first inhabitants were ancestors of the Gola and the Kissi people from North Central Africa who arrived as early as the 12th century. They were joined by the Quran people, Kru, Kawa, Bassa, Kran, Dele ethnic groups moving from the north to the east. As an individual with a master's degree in human relations, I can tell you the theme that is consistent throughout human history is migration. Let me ask y'all a question. If the freed blacks can prove that they came from the land before the Gola and Kissi people migrated there, does this justify the displacement of the Kissi and Gola people? Does it? No, right? You know, when you look at Liberian history, you see that the Americo-Liberians was so lost in the sauce of Western ideology, they literally excluded the natives from being able to, be a part of government, in many instances being able to hold land, and in many instances being able to even have any type of influence in the area that they was there before. You see what I'm saying? In the name of consistency, settler colonialism is bad in every instance. I don't give a damn who the settler is. Free Palestine until it is backwards. You feel me?